Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything, where today we are continuing with our series in drawing every country in the world's flag. And before I get into the country that we're going to be drawing today, just want to apologize. Been on a bit of a hiatus here. We should have been finished up by now. We've only got, I believe, 9 countries left to draw in these flags, but life gets in the way, things get in the way, but we're going to power through this. And like I said, we've got less than 10 left, so we're just going to get right to it. And another big part of the reason why this channel has slowed down a little bit is because a lot of the countries that are left are they're kind of heavy hitters, right? So had to do a little bit more research than normal. Was a little bit intimidated by my ability to deliver accurate and proper history perspectives on some of these channels, because I did fire all of my research assistants, so it's just me going forward. But with that said, I thank you for sticking in there and waiting it out to the end. And if you're new, pause this video, go back, watch every single video that I've done so far on these flags, and then get back to me, and we'll continue with this one. I'll wait. All right, you're back. All right, awesome, because today we have a huge one, right? Literally, right? We have China. All right, so China has the largest population, out of any country in the world. As far as their standing in history, they were ancient before ancient was ancient. Before time was invented, there existed the civilization of China. And this is kind of gonna just be sort of like just a winging it sort of episode, spitball take on Chinese history. Because again, there's just there's so much of it, and a lot of it is very interesting. They've been kind of all over the place, and one thing I always find interesting about China is that even if you look back to like ancient Chinese writings, because Chinese China as a civilization dates back to at least like the 13th century BC, right? Like under like the Shang dynasty, then the Zhao, and legendary sort of intellectual philosophers like Confucius, right? These Chinese, even in Confucius's writings, as ancient as they are, he never talks about the beginning of a China, right? So, even back when he was, when he was writing his philosophy, he talks about a reunification of China, right? Like even way back when. So it's like, it's almost like China was something that always existed, and that definitely plays into their attitudes towards other civilizations, and I think it's kind of worth studying, right? Because especially here in the West, we kind of look at everything through a Western lens, and of course, China is sort of controversial, right? And it's kind of one of the big boogeymen in America, along with Russia and like Iran. And there are possibly, legitimate reasons for that, but I like to look past the propaganda and kind of look at things as they are. So hopefully I can do a little bit of a myth busting with this episode as well. And yeah, we'll get right down to it. Yeah, so the imperial era of China began around 200 BC, the Qin dynasty, and that lasted until the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912. And during this period, China, sort of just like any empire, has its it waxes and wanes, it rises and falls. But China was always kind of an insular empire. And it's not to say they didn't expand, because, China today is basically like a Han Chinese, like sort of a supremacist society, because, there are, Muslim, Uyghurs in China. There's the Tibetans. Western China is a lot different than like, Eastern China. But, for the most part, they haven't really expanded much, right? So another thing about China that might be misunderstood, like from Western eyes, is that the Chinese, especially, we'll kind of start like in the 19th century here as far as like our Chinese history, because, like as far as like, the state of China, its current constitution, not necessarily written constitution, but how it functions as a state, kind of traces its origins to, to that period in time. So if we're playing the game of like geopolitics, when, China's current stance in the world kind of has to be traced to that. So China, whether you call it arrogance or, national pride, a number of things, they always viewed, themselves, kind of like, they had the mandate of heaven, right? There always was a China. There always will be a China. And they have, pretty good reason for thinking like that, because, the Chinese were great inventors, a lot of great scientific achievements and things like that came from China. But, with pride, pride comes the fall. So as European powers start to rise, and they're expanding into the Pacific Ocean, with their empires, China, kind of viewed it, they viewed the Europeans trading with them as like a privilege for the Europeans, right? Like, so, even if the Europeans maybe had, better this or that they wanted to trade with the Chinese, there was sort of that sort of insular like kind of attitude that the Chinese had to these foreign powers that were kind of encroaching on their influence. And of course, national pride, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think it's controversial to say that China's influence kind of started to fall by the 19th century, as the European powers became kind of the top dog in the international sort of a mercantilist game. So China does, as they withdraw from the world stage, they do kind of regress, and a lot of foreign powers, start getting a lot of influence there. Namely like the British, of course, like the famous thing is Hong Kong, but then of course the Portuguese as well with Macau. And so yeah, China does start to kind of fade, like from being like sort of like the top dog on the world stage as far as like trade and commerce and things like that. But going into like the 20th century, there's a lot of European influence there, which does lead to the Boxer Rebellion, right? So you have kind of like these Chinese like anti-imperialists that rebel. There's a lot of Christian missionaries in China around that time. So they're trying to get rid of this foreign influence. And there's like a 5-nation army, mainly like European powers that put this down. So China kind of undergoes a period of like humiliation, sort of leading into World War I. And they're also fighting. They're fighting off Japan, who Japan kind of takes like a reverse attitude of what China took, like leading into the 20th century. So Japan, China, kind of have always been at odds throughout history. Japan is basically just a bunch of rocks in the ocean, so not a lot of natural resources. But they decide to industrialize, right, to kind of compete with the rest of the world, which sort of leaves China in the dust. And there's a lot of conflict between China and Japan, especially leading up to World War II. And that causes a lot of problems, which we'll get into because we're going to have a little bonus content, because this flag is pretty simple. You've definitely seen it before. So red and yellow, we automatically know, communism, right? Communism is the ruling ideology in China, even though they're not completely communist as far as like from a Marxist-Leninist standpoint, like this day, as far as like the ideology. But we'll get to that. So the red represents revolution. The stars symbolize the 4 social classes: the working class, the peasantry, the urban bourgeoisie, and the national bourgeoisie, united under the Communist Party of China. All right, so now that we're getting into the 20th century, I'm going to get to the bonus content here. So you have a period of like civil war and warlords. In the 19th century, there's probably more people that died in China like during that period than in like World War I and World War II combined. But just because Chinese like record keeping and things like that, it's it's kind of foreign to like Westerners, and all that stuff isn't like completely like recorded and declassified and things like that. So we don't even really know how many perished during that time. But it was a rough time for China, and you see a lot of splits during this time with like nationalists and like kind of those that want to move forward as well. Leading into kind of post World War II, and I'm skipping a lot here, of course, because it's China, it's ancient. There's no way to cover all of it in a quick episode here. But you see a lot of communist influence in China, right? So China was an ally of the United States, right? Because Japan was an enemy during World War II. But you can argue, and I think a lot of recent declassified documents from like the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and a lot of even like some of the American correspondence with like FDR and his sort of brain trust, they basically backed the Soviet Union 100%, even though the Soviet Union basically had no leverage at all, and kind of left China to the dust, right? Because there was like a sort of like an anti-communist movement with why am I forgetting his name? Oh yeah, Chiang Kai-shek, right? So even though he wasn't like an ideological like capitalist or anything like that, he was the man of the hour, right? Like, so he was kind of supposed to be sort of allied with the West at the time, and all this Lend-Lease aid that sort of went to the Soviet Union, basically none of that went to China. And then post World War II, China falls to communism. Chiang Kai-shek flees to Taiwan, so that sort of sets the stage for the Taiwanese issue that still kind of lasts to this day. Taiwan sees themselves as the real China, and then the rest of like mainland China, the communist China, is basically like kind of the internationally recognized China. But yeah, and that happened under this guy right here. So I'm drawing him right now, and this guy was I guess I should probably name him first, right? So we're drawing Mao, all right, Mao Zedong. So Mao was he was right up there in body count, right? Like right up there with Stalin as far as how many people were kind of killed, under his regime. Not just through like famine and things like that, but and war, right? Because obviously there was sort of a power struggle in China at that time, but also his cultural revolution, right? So Mao was a lot like Stalin in that he sort of ruled his country via like a cult of personality, right? So the Cultural Revolution it eliminated a lot of suspected counter-revolutionaries, saboteurs, those that had Western sympathies. And Mao, he was a peasant, so he did not come from privilege, but he was a librarian when he actually sort of adopted this ideology of Marxist-Leninism. I wouldn't call him like an orthodox Marxist-Leninist, just because Eastern cultures and attitudes towards government and things are so much different than those that were, I wouldn't say in the West, but Russia, still having kind of Orthodox Christian origins and DNA in their system. It's just kind of a different flavor, but same sort of brutality and kind of disregard for human life. So Mao, he a big reason why he sort of came to power was because communism. Remember, the Chinese were always democracy and things like that we talk of. And I know democracy sort of means like a million different things in the West, right? It just basically means what the United States government likes at the moment, like for this time. But you know what I'm talking about. That stuff is like kind of alien to these people because they never adopted it. And again, China was the society that was millennia old before the United States was even an idea. So it's just a very different way of looking at things. And a lot of people died during Mao's time. Possibly one of the most authoritarian regimes, and that's saying something. I know we haven't done a Russia episode yet, and we will, of course. And Russia and the Soviet Union are kind of two different things, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to that. We'll get to that eventually. Only 8 countries left after this one, so stick in for a week and a day, subscribe, and you'll see that one. But yeah, Mao had a split with Stalin, right? And the Chinese, the ones that were loyal to Chiang Kai-shek, kind of felt alienated by America for, America basically kind of leaving them kind of flat on their ass during World War II to fall to communism. And that's kind of an simplification, but we only got so much time here again. There's a lot of good stuff you can read about this sort of period in Chinese history. I recommend Stalin's War, all right, by a guy named Sean McMeekin. That's a great sort of a revisionist take on World War II history. But under Mao, massive famine, massive death. He influences a lot of the other regions in his area as well. Like Pol Pot, for example, he was in China during the Cultural Revolution. So he, learned a lot of his tactics, from the Maoists, and they supported the Khmer Rouge and all that as well. So bad dudes, but during the Cold War, China, obviously a hot spot. Mao dies in can't remember if it was late 60s, early 70s. What is time, give or take. But then Deng Xiaoping kind of takes over, and we start to see kind of during Mao's last days here, them opening up to the West a little bit, not being allies, but kind of due to this break with the Soviet Union. And this is where like Nixon and Kissinger come in, and another great book to read to kind of understand China by a guy who, whatever you think about him, he definitely understands their ways. Henry Kissinger, right? His book on China should be a recommended reading for anybody who's not interested in framing things as far as like good guys, bad guys, but is just into the quote-unquote real politique of situations. So he wrote a great book on this. And so basically the United States, kind of opened up trade with China to basically strangle the Soviet Union out, right? So if we don't have to exchange Christmas cards with them or anything, but if we can get them out of that sphere of influence, we can, we can kind of drown out communism, because facing a united China and Soviet Union, that would kind of be a nightmare, right? But was that the right thing to do? Who knows, right? But you can argue that maybe some of the bigger blunders happened in subsequent administrations, as far as like, basically giving all of our manufacturing to China. Because again, they're not ideologically as communist as like, the original like sort of Marxist-Leninists, but they still basically have slave labor, right? So we can produce T-shirts, video games, shirts. I already said shirts. Toys, electronics, everything dirt cheap, because they have slave labor, basically. So not good, if you're, if you kind of basically care about, human rights or things like that. But that's a combination of many things. We won't get into all of that, but so kind of bringing us up to the modern day. China has in some ways adopted way more free market policies than most capitalist countries, which would make this guy here, Mao, probably kind of turn in his grave. But again, there's always the Chinese boogeyman, right, which I want to talk about a little bit. There's always like, what is China going to do? They're going to take us over. They're going to, well, first off, that would be a massively hard thing for them to do, right? Because they have a lot of problems. So does the West. But as far as like all the damage that the one-child policy, and don't remember if I mentioned that or not, but the one-child policy after Mao died, said that they could only have one child, preferably male, for every overpopulation and things like that, creates a real big imbalance between the sexes, right? You wind up with a lot more males than females, so you're going to have a lot of social issues with that. Rural China is still, extremely poor. You can say whatever whatever you want about like the American sort of welfare systems and things like that, but even in like the poorest places in America, we don't really have children like infants like going blind from malnutrition, but that's still a thing in China. So they're not like the scary boogeyman, which kind of reminds me, because this is sort of how they painted the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union was going through the same. The Soviet Union obviously had a great, they were a great military industrial sort of power, and China is as well. But when we talk about competing and things like that, what are we competing with them with, right? Like their ability to make cheap stuff that falls apart, and Chinese technology and things like that are nowhere near American levels. So I do think it is a bit of it's always like a rallying cry, right? Like kind of like the Islamic world was like in the old George Bush days, right? Like to get jingoism, to crank that up to 11, like oh, China's gonna do this. Or another example, like the Chinese balloons or whatever that were going over the United States. I frankly didn't care about any of that. I think honestly that's something that like people in the State Department do just to get a rise out of people. Because if you're really that worried about like Chinese spying and things like that, it's like, well, y'all have cell phones, y'all have TikTok apps and things like that. So it's I don't know, I always think that China's kind of used as like one of those things to really get like Americans on the side of whatever the military industrial complex wants to do, right? Because they always need a boogeyman, and China's easy to point to as far as that. But a lot of the problems, again with and I'm obviously not saying China is perfect or anything like that, but a lot of the problems with that are just a result of kind of America losing its sovereignty, giving we saw this during 2020, as far as like the supply chains and stuff. A lot of supply chains got severely disrupted because, all our stuff was coming from China. And I'm not going to say that's an easy fix. You can't turn that switch back on overnight. But it should be something that they, Americans think about doing, right, as far as bringing back production and things like that. Because you're going to have short-term hurt, right, as far as costs going up and things like that. But that's better than just slowly bleeding to death, right? Because the alternative, that is the alternative. But I went on a bit of a rant, didn't I? All right, what did you draw, James? Oh, so this is Mao. All right, so Mao. And I drew him like this because I always thought, as much as I knock on those filthy, dirty commies, right? I do have, and you can tell because I'm always cheap, right? I use these cheap markers and cheap pieces of paper and stuff, and it's pretty DIY here. So my DIY background, I ran with a lot of punk and hardcore kind of scene back in the day, listening to that music and stuff, and you always see this kind of imagery, right? And I think there is a reason for that, because again, running back with those scenes back in the day, all your posters and stuff for concerts used to look like this, right? Probably because a lot of them sort of are extreme sort of Marxist Leninist commie bastards, but it's striking, right? So you look at a lot of the Soviet Union's artwork and stuff too. It's very sort of brutalist, and really elevates like the Stalins and the Maoists to like god status. But powerful imagery, right? Like sort of like the fist too, like like from Power to the People kind of stuff. The hammer and the sickle, I don't agree with that stuff at all, but yeah, again, it makes some powerful posters, right? The red, the yellow. So yeah, so you would see a lot of this stuff around China, during like the Maoist days, and probably even still today, right? But yeah, so that's this is me, just doing my part, just sharing some good old communist propaganda with the world. So shout out to all my communist fans. I'm just kidding. Do I have communist fans? I highly doubt it. If you've been paying attention to my channel for more than a minute, we are not commie sympathizers here, but good artwork, guys. I understand why your propaganda works, and that's what we like to do here, right? Even if we don't agree with stuff, we like to get to the psychology of it and figure out why it takes foot, why it influences people. And speaking of influencing, I would like to influence you to like. I would also like to influence you to subscribe, and most importantly, I would like to influence you to tune into the next episode, because we've only got a few left and we are almost done. So that's China. I appreciate it, guys. Sorry for the hiatus, and again, I'll see you soon. All right, bye.